Welcome everyone, and we're back, and this time actually with a guest that I've been really looking forward to talk to. Um, Tonight we have Eric Hernandez. I think a lot of you might have seen him floating by somewhere in debates with Matt Dillahunty. He's been on Dogma Debate, a conversation that I would really say that everyone should watch. I think that was one of the best things that I've seen with Eric. Obviously, there was a little problem with Art and Ra. We're going to touch on that as well. But first of all, I want to say welcome to my guest, Eric Hernandez. Eric, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me on. It's good to be here.
Okay, great. Can you do a little introduction for people who aren't aware who you are?
Yeah, my name's Eric Hernandez. I'm the apologetics lead for the Baptist General Convention of Texas, and that encompasses everything from putting apologetic conferences together for our churches in Texas to doing trainings with churches or leadership or having conversations with non-believers like yourself or even doing debates, formal or online or anything like that. And yeah, I'm just glad to be here. Glad to be able to be on your show. It's an honor.
Yeah, it's so I was really looking forward to this. We just discussed this offline. I've been trying to do this since 2017, since you were on with David Smalley on Dogma Debate. Which brings me to the first question. How's your book going?
Thanks for asking. I haven't touched that in some time, to be honest with you. Long story short, so I've been with the Texas Baptist for about a year and a half, and prior to that, I was working maybe three or four jobs, just busting my butt. When my not to get into the sob story and all that, but my wife and I we get married, and a few years later, we get our first house, and things are going good. She has a job, and then she gets pregnant towards the end. She worked at a school, and towards the end of the semester, she had to take the time off, and then she wasn't going to go back because with the birthing process, so that kind of cut our income in half. And so I picked up a couple more jobs, cutting grass in the summer and stuff like that. So that kind of even put stuff on hold. And then when I got this job at Texas Baptist, I just opened up a whole new world and more invitations to go places. So I haven't really touched it in quite some time, and especially now because I'm going back to school to do some classes and going for a master's and stuff like that. So it's still something I'd like to do, but it's basically on pause for the time being.
Okay, so well, actually, the title of the book was the very reason uh, that I really wanted to talk to you. So, do you still know the title, the entire title?
Yeah, it's something like why I'm not an atheist, and the subtitle is an analysis of the logically inconsistent, philosophically incoherent, unjustified, irrational, atheistic worldview.
So it's
Something to
close.
that effect.
It's close. Yeah. So probably at least this will get the side chat started. So but you already told you're a Baptist, so obviously you're a Christian.
Yes,
Uh,
sir.
so the title of the book, like David Smalley said back then, we can do an entire show just on the title of the book. But um, oops. Oh, okay, you're back. How did you come up with that title? Because that is kind of
Um,
interesting.
yeah. So there one there's a philosopher. His name's Thomas Nagel, and the book that he wrote it has a really long title, and I liked it. In fact, I always I can actually look it up right now. It's called Mind and Cosmos, but the subtitle of the book is what was really interesting. It had a real long subtitle, and it is why the it's called Mind and Cosmos: Why the Materialist Neo-Darwinian Conception of Nature is almost certainly and it was something that caught my attention. And then, of course, Richard Dawkins' long rant on the God of the Old Testament. Um, and basically, I thought as I studied in the past and just kind of looked at the implications of an atheistic worldview, I began to see certain defeaters or incoherence in belief systems or beliefs that would lead to contradictions. And I just kind of thought, how could I describe atheism in that sense? And that's kind of where I got that idea.
Okay. So, and this would be then my question. If when I talk to a theist, I never describe exactly what their beliefs are, because I think it's a lot better to just ask and then take it from there. And that would be my problem with the title as well. If you are going to describe what atheism is, you're probably going to get it wrong 99 out of 100 times. We also do an atheist show which is aptly called Herding Cats, because there is no consistency, and probably everyone will define himself different. You asked me before the show, and I said it might be best to do this when we're live. You asked me about my position. So there are a few. There are, last I checked, a couple of million gods, in which I lack a belief. I have no reason to believe in any of those. There are also a few gods that I think I know don't exist. So that would be my position as an atheist. Do I know that there's absolutely no God? No, because I think no one could know that, because there could be a God who does nothing currently and is lurking somewhere, so there's no way to check. And I think, at least to me, that would be the most honest position to take.
Okay. Yeah,
So,
I mean, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I guess to the first thing you said. So in the title, I guess I wouldn't say I'm necessarily describing what atheists believe, but conclusions that I've come to, because so in the book, and even when I do debates, and the last debate I had with Skylar Fiction, I kind of touch on this. That so when you look at the field of epistemology, which is a study of beliefs and knowledge, understanding how beliefs work, you can see that there are times where beliefs can create what's called an epistemic chain, which means a certain, let's say, belief A, whatever that belief is, if true, would imply belief B. And then if belief B is true, that may have another implication of belief C. So you have this chain that starts from a base belief. But if a belief implies something that's false or contradictory, then it would follow that that base belief would be false as well. It's also seen in logic, when you have these rules of logic, like what's called modus ponens, where you say if P, then Q. So if P is true, then therefore Q. But if you say not Q, well, then it also follows that not P, that P would be false. And I mean, I may be going deeper than I need to there, but so the title's basically getting at the conclusions of what I see. If there is no God, these are the conclusions I think it would lead to, and they would be conclusions that would be self-defeating or undermine or irrational or inconsistent.
Okay, so I think I could agree with most of that. And as I said, we are getting questions from the side chat, so I'll just try, and as I get them in, one of our co-hosts is monitoring the side chat, so he'll throw the questions at me. He had a question himself. I'll go to the question from the audience first. If you have a question, Artie is looking at the side chat, so he'll convey the questions to me. I got a question from Critical Cripple. What do you think an atheistic worldview is?
A worldview that. So I would define it, and I know people would disagree, but I think this is the way the word's used. But I'm okay if people want to define it differently. I think that can lead into a semantic debate that maybe is a tangent. But basically, if you were to ask me what I think atheism is, I would say atheism is a belief there is no God. And an atheistic worldview would be a belief that would start with that base belief that God does not exist?
See, and that's I think where we differ. Um, from what I have learned, I've been active in the atheist scene since 2015. Um, for the most part, it is just a lack of belief, and I'm pretty sure you've seen it that there's a meme floating around that people use in this case, that you have theist and atheist, but you have also agnostic atheist and agnostic theist because one addresses belief. Atheism and theism address belief. Gnosticism and agnosticism address knowledge. And so to make a knowledge claim about a God not existing, then you at least have to have the right arguments, and which differ from God to God.
Yeah, and I'd say so. I disagree with those classifications. I think they're contradictory categories because when we're talking about these things in a classical sense, we're talking about beliefs. So an agnostic would say that, in other words, knowledge doesn't come into the question here. So you can have the belief there is a God, you can have the belief there is no God, or you can say I don't hold a belief one way or the other, or you can even go as far as say I don't have the sufficient knowledge relevant to make a belief or have a belief one way or the other. So, for example, I don't watch hockey, and if you ask me, do you think X is going to win? I could say no, and you say, oh, so you think he's going to lose? And I say, oh, well, no, I don't think that either. I don't have a belief either way. I'm agnostic about it because I don't watch hockey. I know nothing about the teams. So that's where I see the problem would be. And when you add the word agnostic in front of atheist or theist, then it gets to a complication to where you have these overlapping positions. Because if atheism is a lack of belief, then what would be an agnostic atheist? Maybe we can start there.
Yeah, so an agnostic atheist is someone who does not believe that the God exists, but doesn't have knowledge, so cannot know that the God doesn't exist. The difference between the two is the burden of proof. If you're a Gnostic atheist on a particular God, then you have a burden of proof. Then you need to prove why this God cannot exist. And
So,
I don't
well,
think it's possible for every God. I mean, if someone would come at me and say, "Do you believe in Zeus?" I would say no. But I don't know enough about Zeus to make a coherent case that he doesn't exist. So I could make that case for a few gods, including the God of the Bible. So and that's where the difference comes in.
so here's the problem I see there is that well, a few things. So when we're talking about beliefs, knowledge becomes irrelevant at that point. So if I asked you, do you believe in Zeus? You could just say no. And then if I ask you, could you make a case? You could still say no. Doesn't mean you're necessarily irrational. It just means maybe you might need a few minutes to create a case, and it might not even be the best case. You might even say I could make a weak case, or maybe my case isn't strong enough. But nevertheless, the fact remains that you believe Zeus does not exist. So at that point, we're only talking about beliefs. Now, if atheism is defined as a lack of belief
I think I
and
think I think you're.
agnosticism,
Sorry that I'm interrupting, but I think you're going wrong there. It's not that I believe Zeus does not exist. I don't believe
oh, okay.
Zeus exists. I don't believe he exists. I'm not saying that I believe that he does not exist, which are different positions.
Sure.
One is
Okay.
one
So
one one is the belief claim. The other one, if you say I believe he does not exist, that's a knowledge claim, because you can only make that claim if you have that knowledge.
I don't. I disagree because it's to say I believe Zeus does not exist. You're saying I believe, not I know. So I
Yes.
could say, like I could say, so I could say I believe my brother's at home right now, and maybe I do know it, but maybe he's not home. But it doesn't mean I don't believe it. We have beliefs every day that you know because I think when we're bringing in the question of knowledge, I think that's often confused with certainty, and I don't think knowledge requires certainty. To get back to what I was going to ask is if atheism is defined as a lack of belief, then an agnostic and agnosticism is without knowledge, then agnostic atheism would be without knowledge that I lack a belief.
No,
And that doesn't seem to make
no,
sense.
no. The knowledge comes in whether or not you can make a strong case if a God exists or not. That's where the knowledge claim comes in. I can't come up with evidence for every single God that they do not exist.
Right, but so you're equating knowledge with the ability to make a case.
At least in my position, everyone's different. In my position, if I claim to know that a certain God doesn't exist, I need to have clear evidence for that. I need to have compelling evidence for that. That would also be compelling evidence for someone else. And I have to be able to make that case. And
Right,
if I can't make that case, then I can't know that that particular God doesn't exist. I can claim that I know. I'm with you right there. I can claim that I know, but I don't actually know it, because and this is something that I remember from the talk that you had with David Smalley, where you were talking about knowledge. Knowledge isn't always true. You can know things which are false based on.
I disagree. You can believe things that are false, but you can't, because knowledge by definition requires that the belief in question be true. So knowledge is typically seen as, at bare minimum, a justified true belief. So think of knowledge like making a cake.
Exactly. But so knowledge requires justification. But if your justification is wrong, you can still, at least for you, you will know something that is incorrect. That's what I'm trying to say. And a child. For instance, a child knows that Santa exists because it has seen Santa. They get presents. They've been on Santa's lap. For a child, in a child's world, they absolutely know that Santa exists, based on false information, based on false reasons.
So I think you're confusing knowledge with belief, though, because do you agree that knowledge is a justified true belief?
Yes.
Okay, so part of that ingredient is true. If a belief is false, then it cannot count as a true belief. By definition, that is literally logically contradictory. They're literally complete opposites.
Exactly.
So if you have a belief that's false, it can't be knowledge.
But now you slipped in the word true. A true
No,
belief.
that's part of justified true belief.
Yeah.
That's justified true belief. That's knowledge.
Yes. Yeah. But I think there are levels of knowledge. Not everything you know is absolutely true, because let's take for instance science. At the moment, we've come pretty far, and there's still new evidence coming in. Which
could I interrupt real quick to clarify? Because
go ahead.
And only because I don't want you to misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm saying that by definition, knowledge requires that the belief be true, which means if a belief's not true, then by definition it cannot be knowledge. So that's why I'm saying that by definition, no one can know something that is false. You can believe it and think you know it, but it turns out you don't know it if, in fact, what you're believing is false. So I think false knowledge is literally a self-contradiction that's impossible.
Yeah. So I'm not entirely sure. I think maybe part of it might be semantics. I'll grant you that. I'm not entirely sure. I'll have to check. So we do these shows in order to not only make the guest think, but also ourselves. So at least thanks for that, for giving me something to think about.
I'm glad. Yeah, that's good. Thank you, and thank you for being humble enough to say that. It's really refreshing to hear. That's your goal. So I appreciate that.
Well, so I sincerely believe in honesty. And so if I'm going
Amen.
to sit here and going to lie to you and say, listen, I'm sticking to my proposition just because there's a lot of people in the side chat watching this. Most of them will be atheist. Uh, and I need to save face. That's not how this works. If I need to be honest, if you come up with a thing that I need to think about, then I absolutely need to think about, and I need to admit that, and I need to be open about that. I just want to go back really, really quick because
Sure.
the question that was asked was, what do you think an atheistic worldview is? Can you
Hmm.
expand on what you think a worldview is? Because I'm I'm on record telling that I don't hold to a worldview because I don't think that is a useful concept. So can you tell me what you think a worldview is?
Yeah. So a worldview consists of, I guess, in the simplest form, is basically someone's answers to life's biggest questions. So I think there's like a seven questions or so that a worldview is going to answer. So whatever answers you give to questions like why are we here, or where do we come from, or is there purpose for meaning, or morality, in any way you answer that is going to unpack what your worldview is, whatever that worldview may be. So let's say if I take a naturalistic worldview, where I think there are no immaterial things that exist, then the question, how did I get here, by default is going to only include exclusively physical mechanisms by which I got here. The question of morality is going to be in some way have to be grounded in be explaining something physical. So the whatever your worldview is, it could be assessed by answering those kind of big questions to life. And I don't remember those seven questions off the top of my head, to be honest with you. But basically, life's biggest questions. However you answer that, that's going to worldview.
Okay, so I'll this is a 50-50 thing. So I do think that people who hold, for instance, a Christian worldview, uh, their answers to some of the things in daily life may be completely different based on that worldview because of a set of rules that they live by, and we could talk about abortion in some cases, whether or not they accept evolution. On the other hand, I don't think that a worldview can change a fact, and that's why
Correct.
I would reject a worldview. I do hold to the scientific method, so what we can demonstrate to be true, that is what comports with reality. And yeah,
Okay.
now go ahead, go ahead.
So so a worldview isn't intended to change a fact. A worldview is, in its simplest form, just a set of beliefs that you have. So whatever set of beliefs you have is going to make up your worldview, and particularly those beliefs, that answer certain specific kind of questions. Um, but you said something interesting there. You said that I think you said truth is something about that we can demonstrate, or could you repeat that?
Yeah, sure. Um, I think that what is true is that what comports with reality and what we can demonstrate to be true.
So you have to be able to demonstrate something before it's true.
No, you have to demonstrate something in order to determine whether or not it's true, and then
Oh, sure.
not only demonstrate it, but at least have it independently verified. Because obviously
But it is true.
you could take a mind altering drug, and I could be sitting here at a screen and thinking that I'm talking to green alien, where in reality I'm talking to Eric Hernandez, who's not a green alien. So For
I'm
me,
legal. Yeah.
for me, it would be 100% true that I'm talking to an alien because that's literally what I see. But I need to be able to demonstrate that what I see is actually correct. So that should be um, independently verified. If I then ask someone else, can you describe the guy that I'm talking to, and they describe someone completely different, then obviously what I see isn't true.
But well, I guess a couple things because even with what you just said though, but then how would they independently identify that and verify that? And then it kind of seems like you'd have to you'd almost go in a circle. If you only have two people, and then you bring in a third person, I'd say same problem. But would you agree with me that something is true prior to us being able to demonstrate it?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Things are there are things that we're not aware of that are absolutely true,
Okay.
and
So okay, good.
until we become aware of them, uh, we have no way to demonstrate them. So no, that could absolutely be possible.
Okay. Yeah, and I just asked that for clarification because it sounded like you were saying that something's true only if we can demonstrate it, and that's why I just asked that question just to clarify.
Hmm. Yeah. So, and the other thing you said about facts, and I know now we're going to get into to somewhat of a fight. I accept evolution as a fact. You do not, and that's where I say a worldview uh, can't help you there because I fully admit that someone like you who holds to the Bible could not accept evolution because if they accept evolution and I think Dawkins said this in an interview in Australia somewhere where he said that fundamentalist Christians are the ones who at least are being honest because the Bible describes a creation event, and if evolution is true, then that event is false. And I know there most Christians accept evolution, and I commend them for that, but I couldn't conceptualize that within their way of thinking. So and that's where I say if you have clear facts, and a worldview can't change that.
Yeah, well, sure. I mean, but a worldview is not intended to change facts. It's just an assessment of your beliefs.
Hmm.
So it's not intended to change facts in any sense.
Well, so but that would be different for different Christians. I'm pretty sure that I've spoken to Kent Hovind, and there's Ken Ham and whole answers in Genesis, who literally say the exact opposite. That is not a fact. They reject scientific findings, and without refuting them uh, in scientific papers, and that's exactly
Is it?
what I mean.
Would you say it's possible that naturalistic evolution, is false?
So, with the evidence that we currently have, I think I forgot the title. The Academy of Science. Maybe someone in the side chat knows. The American Academy of Science, I think, has proclaimed that with the current evidence, evolution is a fact, and it's also a fact because we've seen it in not only in the lab but also in nature. So that part can't be refuted. It's a fact as well as a theory, and it's the best supported theory that we have. So I would say it's a fact. So there are still disputes about details. I mean, and there always will be because we don't have access to every single animal that has roamed the earth at some point in time, and so there will still be for instance, they find fossils and think that it's a new animal when it later turns out when there are more findings that it's actually a juvenile from a previously known animal. So that's where you need to shift classifications back and forth, and that is just because you don't have enough evidence. But the fact that evolution happened, yeah, I'm completely convinced of that.
So, and the reason I'm asking, because I don't really, I mean, I personally don't think it's a big deal. I just don't believe naturalistic evolution or evolution is true. But I mean, if someone as a Christian did believe that, I don't personally have a problem with that. The only reason I asked if it's possible that it was false is just to kind of, was to kind of set up to make a point to the point you're making. If evolution were false, would your beliefs change that fact?
If so, what beliefs would change? I mean, if
Now,
evolution is false, we would need some kind of new explanation on how life got on the planet, or how we got the
no,
diversity
I'm
of life, not how life got here. But the
no, but my question is, if it were false, would your beliefs that it's true change it?
if it is demonstrated to be false, obviously, yeah, sure, because
But
you
no, I'm saying your beliefs that it's true wouldn't change. If let's pretend, let's just hypothetical. Let's pretend that evolution is false. Your belief that it's true wouldn't change the fact that it's false, right?
no, no, it wouldn't.
Right. So because you said a worldview can't change beliefs, so I'm saying sure. I mean, no one argues that it can, because even if the opposite were true, it would apply to you just as well as it applies to me.
Hmm.
Um, so that I only asked the question, and I probably should have just been more direct with what I was trying to ask. So, but I just asked to show or to demonstrate that sure, beliefs aren't intended, worldviews aren't intended to change facts. In fact,
No,
we should align our worldview to the facts and to what reality shows us.
yes, I fully agree. And so, just to clarify, and because I've listened to you a lot, I got up to speed with certain terms. I'm Dutch. English is my third language, and
Wow.
I've seen you talk really really fast, and those are the moments where sometimes I need to go back and listen what it is just say there. And there could at times be some confusion. Usually, as I said, I have a co-host. My co-hosts, two of them are in the U.S., one's in Canada. So where I lack, they will be able to jump in. And I have to say, I got three amazing co-hosts, each with their own distinct quality. Uh, but yeah, so that's where that probably might be a problem at times. So can I ask you? I already know that you do not accept evolution. Can I ask you why?
Sure. So one, I really haven't studied it too much. I'll say that openly. It's not a question that really concerns me. To be blunt, if someone were to ask me, I mean, I could care less whether or not evolution happened, because so my studies and focus have been more on the philosophical, metaphysical aspects of nature of reality. So if God exists, if he used evolution, great, I'm still here. If it was special creation, great, I'm still here. If the Earth is 6,000 years old or 14 point something billion years old, great, I'm still here. It doesn't. I don't care. I guess when it comes to those questions, those aren't the questions that make me think, or make me wonder and stuff like that. So kind of the same, like well, I don't want to go there, because well, no, I believe the world's round, as I'm sure you do too, right? If the world was flat, I wouldn't, and it wouldn't bother me, and I don't believe it's flat. I think that's a ridiculous position. I'm sure you
Yeah.
agree with me there. But my point is simply, those questions aren't questions that I'm gonna spend hours looking into, because I just don't care, I guess, for lack of a better word. Why in particular evolution? I guess I think, from as I understand it, and again, I haven't studied it, as I understand it, there seems to be problems with any type of a naturalistic type of evolution. And more specifically, when it comes to metaphysics, everything has a nature, and a thing's nature is going to set limits of what it cannot do. So if I put an acorn in the ground, it has the capacity within its nature to become a tree. Even if that acorn is never put into the ground, it still has that nature, that capacity within its nature, because that's what grounds its abilities, its nature, its essence. So things cannot change so drastically to a point to where it remains the same thing, because its nature is going to set limits. I cannot plant you in the ground and expect you to become a tree, because your nature has limits on what it can and can't do. And I think that if when you look at a thing's nature, I have trouble conceiving of how it is that something can change its nature by simply rearranging physical parts of a structure.
So I wouldn't call it rearranging physical parts in a structure. It's a little bit more complicated than that. And I'm so pressed for questions. I at times I could divert in different directions here. So evolution is a change in allele frequencies over time, and we've seen it in, as I said, we've seen it in the lab, we've seen it in nature. A good example, I think, and I still have to look it up, the exact name. A few decades ago in Italy, they took a lizard from one island and put it on another island to create another population there. The food that the lizard required wasn't as abundant on the new island, which in just a few decades had the lizard evolve a new part in their digestive tract, so it would be able to eat plant food where it was a carnivore, if I'm completely correct. I'm not entirely sure, but so that is a complete change within the digestive tract. And as for creationists, that would mean that it is acquiring new information, which we know is not entirely impossible.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I mean, I could take your word. It wouldn't. The reason I gave wouldn't be affected by what you're saying.
Hmm. Okay, so what I would like to do is go to something that I thought was really interesting, but does line up a little with this. I have heard you several times. You're convinced that a soul exists, and
Yes.
you can you tell us about that, because that's a topic that I really wanted to talk about.
Yeah. What like the arguments for the soul, or what specifically?
Yeah, your arguments for a soul.
Well, I can give you the outline, then I can go wherever you want to go with it. But basically, um, whenever I teach on the soul, or defend the soul, and as you mentioned, I had a debate with Dillahanty on a 2-hour debate on the existence of the soul. And basically, I start with two basic points. The first point is that consciousness is not physical. And then the second point is that I am more than my brain and body. And from there, I would say that we derive that I am a soul. So to understand any arguments, most if not all the arguments revolving around the existence of the soul, it's important to understand what's called Leibniz's law of identity. And according to Leibniz's law of identity, any two, if we're talking about, let's say, two things in question that we think, are they the same thing? If you said Eric Hernandez and the guest on my show right now, are they the same person? Well, if I am, in fact, if Eric Hernandez is the same person as the person that you're interviewing right now, then it would follow that whatever is true of Eric Hernandez is true of the person you're interviewing, because they're the same person, so they're going to share the same qualities. We're just using two different names or reference to refer to the same thing. So I use the example of, suppose I walk into a laboratory and I see two bottles of clear fluid, and I want to know, are they the same substance? Well, they both. So what I do is I begin to look at their properties. If they're the same substance, they're going to share all the same properties, because they're the same thing. They're just in two different bottles. Let's suppose one says water and the other one says chemical X. Well, I see that they're both clear fluids, and I think, okay, so far I think they're the same substance because they share the property of being a clear fluid. But then I turn over chemical X and it says caution, flammable. Okay, well, I know that water's not flammable. Therefore, even if I don't know what chemical X is, at the very least, I know they cannot be the same thing because they share different properties. With that in mind, when we look at something like consciousness, which is my first point when I give a case for the soul, I would argue that we know that consciousness isn't physical because there are no physical properties that it has. And if there is no soul, then consciousness would have to be reduced to something physical or reducible to something like the brain. But I would say that we know that's not the case because the mind and brain share different properties. The examples I usually give is state of the mind. Uh, Consciousness comes in 5 states, and there are things like thoughts and beliefs. My thoughts and beliefs can have the property of being true or false, but no state of my brain can be true or false. You can't make my brain, you can't make my synapses fire and then say, oh, now these synapses firing are true, but then when we make the synapses fire this way, those synapses are false. That just doesn't. It's a category fallacy. My brain can weigh 3 pounds, but my thought that I'm talking to you right now doesn't weigh 3 pounds. My brain can be 7 inches long, but the smell of a rose or the taste of banana is not 7 inches long. And there's a lot more examples I can go into, but according to the Leibniz's law of identity, if 2 things in question share different properties, then they can't be the same thing. And if consciousness exists, then I would argue it can't be reducible or identical to the brain, or even in the brain because it's not something physical.
Okay, so I really wanted you to get all of that out because I've heard it. I'm not sure if everyone who watches us has ever heard this. I really want to.
Can I say just one more?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll just say one more thing and that's just the first point. I only pause because I know it's a lot to take in, especially like you said if you haven't heard it. That's just the first point, and there's many arguments more to back up consciousness not being physical, but that's just the first point. And the other point I would go into is how I'm not my brain and body. But in other words, that's not my whole case for the soul. That's just a segment of it. But I just had at least wanted to start there.
Yeah. So what we could do is refer people, and I could put a link to that in the side chat. It's your conversation with David Smalley, because you went into that a lot longer than we have the ability to in our show, because that was I think close to 3 hours. Our shows usually run for an hour and a half, so we wouldn't even be able to touch on all of that. What I really want to talk about is I think you're making a couple of false equivalences here. My first objection would be that we have no example of a consciousness existing outside of a brain. We literally have no example of that. Another thing would be that a thought is a brain state, and I would fully agree with you that a thought can be false. The brain state in itself cannot be false because it's a brain state. It either is or it is not. So I would agree with you there, but so the equivalences that, for instance, the smell of a rose and how that is conveyed inside your brain. Obviously, then we're talking about 2 completely different things. I mean, I'm looking at the screen now, and I see you. I see myself and you at the moment. So that is a picture. The picture is conveyed by just sending a number of ones and zeros through an electric component. Those are not the same as you and me. We see each other on a picture. That doesn't also mean that what you see is actually me. It is a depiction of me, which I would think that would be at least closer to what happens in the brain. And I'm not entirely sure. We've got Doc Savage in the sign chat. Maybe he can weigh in on this. But I think that we're already getting to a part where we can hook someone up to a machine and visualize their thoughts. I've seen experiments where artificial limbs are controlled by the human brain, which I think would point to the fact that everything happens in the human brain. We know little about how it exactly works, but we can make a fair assessment. We can even start testing with what we know so far.
Okay, yeah. So you said a few things there. You started with saying that we've never seen consciousness outside of a brain. How do we see consciousness at all?
I think we see consciousness. First of all, we experience it ourselves, and we see other people experiencing it. There's still, I think, no good explanation as to what it exactly is, but I think we've got at least enough evidence that it is a product of our brain.
But
Because
you said we've never seen consciousness outside of a brain. But my
no,
question was, how do we see it at all? How do we even test for that? How do we see consciousness?
by looking at an MRI or an EKG, yeah, an MRI. I think you
And
can
how
you
do,
can you
how do
can you can scan a brain, and you can have people have different thoughts and see where in the brain those thoughts are processed. So,
well, hold on. You said we can scan a brain,
mhm.
well, now I got a kind of another question that relates to that. But
Brain
the original
activity,
question was,
brain activity.
okay, so we've seen brain activity.
Mhm.
Okay, but you said we've never seen consciousness outside of the brain. I'm asking, how do you see consciousness, not how do you see brain activity?
Well, so consciousness is a brain activity. It is something that is produced by the brain. We only see consciousness in living beings that possess a brain.
But
We've
I'm asking,
never
how do you
seen.
see that?
We can determine if people are conscious or not.
How
We
do we
can.
see consciousness? You say
We
we've
can.
never seen consciousness outside our brain. I'm just wondering how you would even see consciousness in the first place, and then how would you test it to see if there's consciousness outside the brain?
We can. As I said, we can determine whether or not a living thing is conscious, because we can do tests to see whether or not they're conscious. We can do that with humans. We can do that with several animals. Um, I think. I
And what
think.
would we be doing? What
Uh,
kind of test?
what kind of tests? Whether or not they have the capability to think, whether or not they have the capability to respond to their environment, make informed decisions based on what they see in their environment. I think I don't know if you've heard of that. Coco the gorilla, I think, is a great example. She's
Can a robot do all that?
Yeah, sure.
Can a robot respond to its environment? Is a robot conscious?
A robot a robot is programmed. So then we're getting into artificial intelligence, and we have a fair bit of artificial intelligence already, not to the level that humans are on. Although it in some ways it
Is it conscious?
exceeds the human level, but I don't think that we have a robot yet that is conscious, as we would explain consciousness, because it cannot make informed decisions based on its environment. It can only make decisions that are pre-programmed. So I
Couldn't you
wouldn't.
pre-program it? But couldn't you pre-program it to respond to the stimulus in its environment?
Yes, but that's exactly what I said. Then it is pre-programmed.
But you said it. We don't have a robot that can respond to stimulus in its environment.
Only within the limits that are already programmed in. If we've got robots that build cars. If we would set a bike frame in front of it, it wouldn't know what to do, because it isn't programmed to deal with a bike frame. That's
Okay, so some robots have a greater ability to process information by their programming, but it seems that it would meet the criteria that you're asking for when it comes to something being conscious. So I
I,
still don't understand how we see
what I'm
consciousness.
saying, that is the difference. Something that is conscious can make those new decisions based on earlier experiences, not only the environment that it is in.
We can program things to learn,
Yes.
in a loose sense.
So I'll turn the question over to you. Are you aware of a consciousness outside of a brain, and how did you
Yeah.
determine that that was possible?
Yes. God.
That- to me that's not an answer,
That's fine.
because that's just another claim.
Well, I mean, your claim is not an answer, is a claim as well, isn't it?
No, because what I was talking about are things that we can test, we can independently verify. Can we independently verify God?
You can't. You can't independently. Yes, you can't independently verify that I'm conscious.
Couldn't we run tests to determine whether or not you're conscious?
You can run tests to see if I have brainwaves, but I don't see how that determines that I'm conscious.
But that
You,
is
you
but
can.
that's only because you don't consider consciousness to be part of the brain.
So then I can say, well, but then I can say the same thing. But you only think it's conscious because you think that consciousness is in the brain. So it seems like we're
No, it's not.
based on which.
It's not what I think. It's what science has learned so far about it, and the things
Well, I
that
think that's a claim. That's just a claim.
no, because if some things are learned in science, there will be scientific papers, there will be peer review, and you will be able to rebut those if you have good arguments and if you can prove that they're wrong. So
So if
that's completely different with the God claim. We literally have nothing to test. How would we test God?
well, if you, one thing at a time, I suppose, because the only thing you asked me is if I'm aware of a consciousness outside of the brain. I said God. So if God exists, would you at least agree that if God did exist, that would be an example of consciousness outside the brain?
No, no, because
Yeah, one.
if God exists, and I'll explain. If God exists, then I still know nothing about God.
No, but that's not what I asked. I said if God did exist, would that be an example of consciousness without a brain?
No, that was what I was trying to say. If God exists, then we need to figure out what and who God is. Does God have a body? Does God have a brain? We don't know any of this. So we
If
couldn't just jump to the conclusion that then now
Okay,
we've got a consciousness without a brain, because we haven't been able to test that.
so
It's
so
it's not it's
uh,
not that it's not that
let me.
I'm trying to weasel out of the question. I'm trying to be honest. I mean, I know
Sure.
literally nothing about God, because no one has ever been able to demonstrate to me that God exists. So, what would I have to test uh, any
So
capability?
let me rephrase the question.
Go ahead.
It the you understand that the Christian conception of God is that he is incorporeal. He's not physical, right?
It- that is the claim that people put forward to me. I
Right, right. So then you're aware that the Christian concept of God is that he's an immaterial being, right?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
depends on the Christian you talk to, but yes, and there also
Okay.
depends on whether
So
you look at the Bible. There are conflicting things in the Bible. I mean,
okay,
God
so
walked
if
God walked with Abraham, for instance. God walked with Adam
Mhm.
and Eve. God even walked with Satan. If God walked, that would imply that he had legs. If he had legs, then he obviously has a body the legs are attached to. Abraham describes him as a man coming to his door in company of two other men. The two other men leave, and God stays and has dinner with Abraham. If he has dinner, he
now
has a digestive tract, he has a mouth, he has arms. So it the stories are not really consistent.
So I'm curious as to how, and I don't. Please don't think I'm being rude. If you think I'm
No,
being
no,
rude, let me
no,
know because I don't want to
no.
be. I
And
don't want to be rude.
I'm not easily
I'm
offended. So go ahead.
I'm really curious as to how much of this you understand when it comes to what Scripture teaches. Jesus said he's a door. Do you think people read that and think he's literally a piece of wood on hinges?
No, no.
Right.
So
So we know that there's
people could see it that way. I'd say that
right.
that's ridiculous because that's obviously a metaphor.
Right. So the Bible does teach that God is spirit. Now, sure. People can speak in either anthropomorphic or phenomenological languages in ways of speaking, but I mean, I don't. In other words, if I don't want to get bogged down on this issue, but I just say that to say I think you just maybe either understanding a certain part of Scripture, or maybe taking it differently, or the fact that sure, I mean, God, if
I can clarify
God,
that. I can clarify that for you. Um, if you ask me that question, if you ask me any question about God, I need to refer back to you because
okay,
I cannot assume what your position on that particular topic is. And I've talked to a lot of people. Usually people, oh, such and such is a Christian, so therefore that's what they believe because that's what's in the Bible. No, that's not how that works because everyone has their own interpretation of the Bible. So and have yet to meet two Christians who are exactly the same in what they take from the Bible. So to me it's a lot more honest to ask you that question.
okay, sure,
So
okay. So I believe that if God exists, He's a spirit. He's incorporeal. He's not physical. If the God that I believe in existed, would that be an example of consciousness without a brain?
yes, but again,
Okay.
that is not something that has been demonstrated. And
Well, I haven't.
so we have a question from the chat that's related to this. Um, how did you determine that God is conscious? What criteria do you use, and how did you test for that?
Sure. So well, there's a few things to be said here, and before I answer that, so I was simply answering your question
Hmm.
because you said, "Am I aware of one?" Well, and you did agree that if the God I believe in exists, then I would be aware of one, right? So it was just an answer to the question. It wasn't saying
That's not what I
yes,
said.
and I'm
No, no,
just
no, no, no. That's if the God you believe in exists, it would not automatically follow that you are aware of that God. That would be completely different. That's literally what you ask at the start of the show. If something is true, do we need to know about it? Something can be true, and we still have no clue about this because we haven't encountered it yet. So the same thing would be for your
sure,
God. If your God
but
exists, then it wouldn't automatically follow that you know everything about this God. You need to
well, that's
do some
that's a
investigation.
different. But that's a different question. But you well, like to what you just said. You said Christians believe different things, and you need to ask the person yourself. So you asked me,
Yes.
and I'm telling you, the God that I believe in would be a God that is not physical. So if the God that I already believe in exists, then it would follow that I'd be aware of him. Now, that's not saying I've given a defense of it. I haven't done that yet. I was just answering the question. Now, the question was, how would we test for God being conscious? So, and that's a good question. So, when you say test, I hope the person's not doesn't isn't appealing to some type of a scientism, because if God exists and it's not physical, then you can't then science the question of science doesn't apply to something that is non-physical. Science is a great, wonderful, fantastic tool to study the physical world, but it has absolutely nothing to say about the non-physical, metaphysical, immaterial realm, if it exists, of course. Um, well, if the universe is contingent, which means it's not necessary, and it had a beginning, then it would follow that there was a decision made to create the universe. And if there was a decision made, we know decisions come from wills, and wills are grounded in minds. And minds, we know the best example of a mind comes from a person. So that if God did exist and if the universe had a beginning, then I would argue it follows that there must exist an unembodied, conscious person, being that created the universe.
Yes, but that would still not answer the question. And
Well, sure it would, because if the universe had a beginning, it's not necessary, and
no,
it
no,
was a decision to
so
create it.
I got pretty much everything you said, but so if you start with if the God exists, first we need to
No,
no,
I started with if the
let me,
universe is contingent.
okay, but so if all of that happened, we still would need to test and confirm if that is exactly the case. It's literally what you said. I'm going back to what you said. Something can be true, and we can be, and it can be true whether or not we're aware of it or not. So, if that is the case, then while that might be true, we still do not know anything about it. So, we would need at least to determine whether or not it is true. So, and how would we determine such a thing? How would we determine? How would we determine whether or not a God actually exists?
You're familiar with? I'm sure you said you've been doing this. I think you said 2015. Is that right?
Yeah.
You've been doing this.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you're aware of the Kalam cosmological argument.
Yes.
Okay, so I'd say that
which I
would
think
say
that's a terrible argument, but and it's also it has they're different ones. It's not just one argument.
Okay.
There are people who do it differently. William Lane Craig has revised his Kalam in order to get out of something, and I still reject it. But if you want to use it, then please state yours, and I'll be more than happy to address it.
So to answer the question, I think that would be that is the perfect way to establish that. I mean, that would perfectly, demonstrably establish that we have an unembodied conscious entity, namely God.
But how?
Well,
So
you're familiar with the argument, right?
Kalam doesn't address a God. Kalam doesn't address.
Really?
Well, at least the version.
Why would?
Can you state your version of the Kalam?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's the same as Craig's. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. Now, what we do understand about cause and effects, which is a metaphysical principle, is that causes must precede their effects. So anything that's caused by something else, that is going to be prior to the thing itself. It's not going to necessarily be within it. So the person who caused my laptop to come into existence is not inside it, making it run.
I know. So before we get on to a long tangent, let's go over Kalam premise by premise and then get to the conclusion. So premise one is everything.
Well, can I finish unpacking though? Because you said, how does that demonstrate a God that's conscious? And I was going
to. Okay. Go ahead.
Unless.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
So if time, space, and matter, which we know that when the universe began, time, space, and matter began. So for those that are familiar with the argument or maybe don't know it, so if time, space, and matter had a beginning, and everything that has a beginning needs a cause, then time, space, and matter would have a cause. And by default, if causes precede their effects, then the cause of time, space, and matter must be timeless, spaceless, and immaterial. If the universe is not necessary, and we know that because it had a beginning, then the universe would be contingent, which means there's nothing necessary that's going to necessitate the existence of the universe. And if that's the case, then there was whatever that is timeless, spaceless, and immaterial that caused the universe to begin made a decision. We know decisions are grounded in wills. We know that wills come from minds, and the best example of minds we have are grounded in persons. So you would now have a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, personal being, namely God. So that's how I would determine and establish that we have a conscious God that doesn't have a brain.
Yeah, see, but what I noticed is that your Kalam cosmological argument ends in, therefore the universe had a cause. Everything from there is mere assumption.
No. It's deductive logic.
No, it's not. It's
sure,
not.
the
It's
argument,
not, because you cannot know anything about the cause. You cannot know whether or not it's timeless, spaceless, and conscious, for instance, because there could be a physical cause. But let's go back to the first premise. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. That's already that's already a claim you can never demonstrate.
So, well, first, let me say, I don't think you need to be able to demonstrate everything. I don't think everything that can be known needs to be demonstrated. There are. Well, I don't want to go there, but wait a minute. You said that we can't know anything about the cause. But if
No.
causes precede their effects, then you cannot have something within time causing time itself if it itself caused time to exist. That's literally a logical contradiction.
So and that's where I have a problem, because and that's why we need to go back to the premises, and we can skip the fact that no one knows that everything that begins to exist has a cause, because we have no way of figuring that out. Now the second,
Can you demonstrate that?
there's no way to demonstrate if everything had a cause, because I don't know of any human being on the planet or any organization who knows everything. We have no clue. We have no clue how physics work outside of our known universe, and even if there is an outside of our known universe, because there's no way to detect it. So, but let's.
You said, you said there was something you just asked, what was the first thing you said? I think you said something like that we couldn't demonstrate something.
Yeah, there's no way to demonstrate that everything that that exists has a cause. That premise can never be demonstrated.
How do you know that?
Because you don't know what exists. You don't know.
Can you demonstrate that I don't know?
Okay. Can you name what's right in front of me?
No. Probably a camera.
What's right in front of me, does it exist?
If it's in front of you, yes.
But that's you trusting a claim that I just make. If I now say what's in front of me is a big orange dragon, then how would I demonstrate that to you? There's no way you can know everything. So that cause can never be demonstrated. The fact that something exists without a cause can never be demonstrated, because we haven't even barely scratched the surface on knowing what's inside of our universe, let alone what exists outside our known universe. We have no clue.
So do you think everything? You think in order to believe something, everything needs to be demonstrated?
In order to determine whether or not it is true and comports with reality, at least I think we need to demonstrate it and have independent verification. Yes, because everything must be demonstrated. Otherwise, how would we know if it's true? It's just the example that I just gave you. If I say there's an orange dragon in front of me, I can make that claim, and you can be trusting and say, well, obviously there is. That has no bearing on whether or not it's actually true.
So, can you demonstrate that in order to believe something, it must be demonstrated?
What I said is, in order to be justified
to know.
In order to be justified to know whether or something is actually true and comports with reality, we need some form of demonstration, or at least some form of test to demonstrate. And
how would you test that claim? How would you test that claim that you just made?
Quite easy, as I said, with the orange dragon. I can claim it exists. Do you believe it exists?
I'm not sure if you're understanding me. So you said in order to know something is true, and for it to be just, you need to be able to demonstrate it, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that claim that you just made, how can you justify it? How do you demonstrate that? Because if you can't demonstrate it, then you can't know that what you just said is true.
I can't, because in this case it doesn't exist. Now let me make the claim that
no.
Hold on. Let me make the claim that
you misunderstood me.
No, let me make the claim that in a star that we can observe from here, in surrounding that star is a planet. On that planet is an orange dragon. I could make that claim. We have no way of testing. So how would we determine whether or not the dragon is actually there?
So I'm not sure what has to do with what I'm asking, because your statement is, in order to know something is true, it has to be demonstrated.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, that sentence, how can you demonstrate that sentence is true?
Because there is no other way to determine reality. I know of no other way to determine reality. And so
But
at
I'm
some
asking you to
point,
demonstrate it.
um, you need to start with some presumptions, and that is what the scientific method does.
So you're a presuppositionalist.
No, no. It's not presuppositionalism.
Sounds like it.
No, no. The presumptions can be tested. If you get consistent results,
Well, then it's
if
not a
you get
presumption.
if you get consistent results based on your presumptions, that's how you can test them. I mean, that's how we got to the laws of logic. The laws of logic cannot be demonstrated, but they can be demonstrated to work based on uh, uh,
So they
giving
can or can't
giving
be demonstrated.
they cannot be demonstrated. What you can do is see if they give you consistent results, and that means that the laws of logic work. How they
Okay,
work,
so
you cannot demonstrate that.
so then you can't believe that they work if you can't, because you said you can't, if
Yeah,
you,
you can
in order to
believe.
know it's true.
You can believe
You said
because
in order to know it's true, you have to
yes,
demonstrate it. But you just said
yes,
the laws of logic can be demonstrated. So then, according to your standard, you can't.
no. What I said is you cannot demonstrate why, but you can demonstrate that they work based on consistent results when testing. And but
I'm confused here. I'm not.
it's still okay. I want to let's skip the first premise. If we get to the second premise, that's demonstrably incorrect.
You
The
can demonstrate
universe,
the universe is eternal.
at least it didn't begin to exist. I made a meme for someone on Twitter who came up with a great comparison.
But what you're saying, you can demonstrate that the universe is eternal.
No,
You said
the
demonstrably.
universe as we know it is not eternal. It came into existence. I don't think it came into existence. And this is what I wanted to explain. Um, as far as we know, and we can only look so far as what they call Planck time, we can't look beyond that. The universe originated in a singularity. So what happened was a change of state. There was an expansion. We have no clue whether or not everything that is in our current universe came into existence at some point in time.
So you're saying something. So there's something that has always existed and been eternal. Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that we
You
cannot
said
test.
expand.
No, I just said we cannot test for that because we can only look back until Planck time. We can't look before Planck time.
So time had
And
a beginning.
time in our current universe had a beginning. I think we need to specify that because we experience time in our current universe. That doesn't mean that time works exactly the same somewhere else. It could be completely different. We have no clue because we cannot
Um.
investigate that. Our time started at the expansion of the singularity.
So the singularity, was that eternal?
And we don't know. But that means we also do not know whether or
So you
not
disagree with the scientists that say it is. It had a beginning.
that's. I'm not aware of a single scientist who said it is.
I could give you a list of them. So so you said you're familiar with the argument. So you're familiar with the scientists that Craig talks about. Even Krauss says that, yeah, it's likely that the universe had a beginning. Um,
No,
so
no,
you disagree.
no. Krauss specifies this. Krauss says the universe as we know it had a beginning, and
Well, it just sounds like a cop out.
and the beginning of our known universe is the expansion of the singularity.
So the single. So I guess I'm curious.
It
What do you mean by our universe? What do you mean by that? So the singularity was not part of the universe.
the singularity at some point was the universe.
Okay. We're talking about the same thing. Then I don't know why you. So if the singularity was our universe, then then our universe didn't start at the expansion.
Exactly, and therefore it had no beginning. It was
Oh,
a
so, okay.
change.
So I thought you
What
said we
is
didn't know.
referred to as the beginning of our universe is a change of state. It is an expansion from the singularity. What was before Planck time? Where did the singularity come from? No one knows because no one has the ability
But
to investigate.
hold on.
And
Well, I
this is exactly what Krauss has stated. Krauss stated that we can't look so far back as to make some determinations. It's
What? So that assumes there's something to look at. But let me make sure I'm clear, understanding you clearly here. So the singularity was our universe, and you're saying that singularity was eternal.
no. So
You said it
the
didn't have a
mater-
beginning.
so the material that makes up our known universe is the material that was present in the singularity. The singularity expanded. What caused the expansion, we do not know.
I'm,
We have no clue.
but I'm
But
not asking about that.
there could be a physical explanation for the expansion. We just
I'm
don't
not
know.
asking about that. I'm asking about the singularity itself. You said it didn't have a beginning. Is that right?
No, I stated three times already that we cannot know where the singularity came from, how long it has existed, because we can't look past Planck time. Planck time. So Planck time is a time measurement. Planck time is a duration of time, and for that duration we cannot look past it. So whatever
So
happened in that particular period of time, we don't know. What
well, there wouldn't be
happened?
time.
Sorry?
There wouldn't be time.
Obviously there would be because Planck time is a measurement of time.
Well, sure, but that only refers to measuring. I mean, so there can be time that's not measured, but it would still be time. So
No.
so
It
we're
is
talking about
measured.
time, not just
Planck
measuring
time.
time.
Planck time is a clear measurement.
Sure, and that's fine. But
As far as I know, it is the smallest amount of time that we are aware of. It has it. Ah, there was I did read it. I think 2 months ago when it came up in a conversation, and I didn't know, and someone came up with this, and I still need to study it because this is way above my pay grade. Um, but Planck time is a measurement of time based on something, and I forgot what that was.
so is
Either way. Let's say Planck time is an hour, then we still have an hour we cannot investigate. The first hour in our current timeline,
so
and our
let
current
me
timeline had a
let's get
beginning. That's
let's
that.
let's get back to, because there's a lot of words you're saying that I think are meaning something
Hold on.
that you may be using.
Doc Savage just saved me. Planck time unit is the time required for light to travel a distance of 1 Planck length in a vacuum, which is a time interval of approximately 1.911 times 10 to the 43rd power, if I'm correct, in seconds. So
Okay.
that's what Planck time is. I'm probably almost sure that that means as much to you as it does to me. I don't think either of us could do anything with that.
Well, yeah, no, and I don't have a problem with that. Because let's get back to the premises of what you said. So we started this part of the conversation by saying the second premise of the Kalam is demonstrably false.
Yes.
What's first? Tell me what is the second premise?
If I'm not correct, the second premise is the universe began to exist.
Right, and you're saying you can demonstrate that that is false.
Yes, because we cannot determine whether or not it began to exist. We know of
That's
an
not demonstrating it's false.
we
Even if I grant you that, which I don't, that's not demonstrating it's false. That's
it's
just
not
saying, well, we don't
demonstrating
know.
it's not demonstrating it's false. It also is not demonstrating that it's true. And
But you're the one that said you can demonstrate it's false.
if it's not true or false,
Doesn't mean it's false.
if we can determine whether or not it is true or false, we cannot use the premise.
I'm sorry.
We cannot use a premise that we're not even sure of whether or not it's actually
Yep.
true.
But no, but hold on. You said that you can you said it's demonstrably, which means you can demonstrate. It's demonstrably false. I'm waiting for you to demonstrate that that the statement the universe had a beginning is false. I'm waiting for you to demonstrate that the universe is eternal. Because if it didn't have a beginning, then it must be eternal.
Okay.
How can you demonstrate that?
So what happened in Planck time? Can you explain what happened in Planck time and what where did everything start with? And how did
So
how
the
did
burden
you?
of proof's on you. The burden of proof's on you here because you made the claim.
No,
In fact,
I'm
you
saying
made the statement that you can demonstrate that
yes,
the universe
I'm
beginning.
I'm demonstrating that the premise is false. I'm not demonstrating. I'm not saying that I can demonstrate that there was no beginning. I'm saying that there's no way of determining whether or not there was a beginning, yes or no. So
So
if you're going to use the premise the universe had a beginning, then you need to demonstrate that the universe actually had a beginning, and no one on the planet
but
has actually been able to do that. So it's a premise.
so
It's a premise we can't use because we cannot falsify the premise.
okay. So a few things here though. Hold on, time it because first of all, I don't agree with the theory of falsification. I don't think falsification is needed to know something or know something's true. But let me try to be fair here. Maybe you just perhaps worded it. Maybe you just worded it loosely. You didn't mean to say that you can demonstrate the universe didn't have a beginning. Is that fair to say?
Can you say
So then
can you say that again?
maybe you just misspoke because what I heard you say was you can demonstrate premise two, which is the universe had a beginning. You said you can demonstrate that that's false, but maybe you just misspoke. Is that right?
Yes. So I think we got a misunderstanding here. I can demonstrate that the premise is false.
You can demonstrate that.
Not what the premise says. I can demonstrate that the premise is false. The claim you make is false because you have no way of of showing me that the claim is actually correct.
But that's not how epistemology works. So let me here's
Actually,
what I
actually, it is
here's a problem.
how epistemology works. Because if you
Let me say this.
if you
Hold on.
assert a claim without having the ability to back up that claim, then I can just dismiss it, which is Hitchens' razor, which is asserted without evidence
That's
can be
that
dismissed without evidence.
that's not. But dismissing something doesn't proving it's false. So
It
if I
doesn't.
said
It doesn't.
let, let,
It doesn't. And that's exactly what I was saying. It doesn't prove it's false. It also doesn't prove it is correct.
right,
It
then
doesn't
you
prove.
can't
It
say that
doesn't
you can
prove.
demonstrate it's false.
No. But
You can only say that.
could we use a claim that we have no way of verifying whether or not the claim is correct? Could we then use it as if it is correct? I don't think so.
Well,
I think that would be
that's funny that.
dishonest.
Hold on. That's well. First of all, it's just funny you say that because earlier you said that you can only know it's true if you can demonstrate it. And I asked you how do you demonstrate that statement, and you said you couldn't. So by that own standard, you'd have to retract everything that you said about that.
No, because there we were talking about the laws of logic.
No, I was talking about your statement, your proposition that in order to know something's true, it has to be demonstrated. Can
Yes.
you demonstrate the proposition that we can only know things that are true if they're demonstrated?
Can I demonstrate whether or not the claim that something is true only if we
If it
can
can be
demonstrate it?
demonstrated.
No, because there could be truths that we're not aware of, so we wouldn't be able to demonstrate them.
No.
It's
But you
but
said in
that
order
but
to know
that
something's true,
yes, something
it
can
has to be
be something
demonstrated.
something can be true without our ability to demonstrate that it is true. But that doesn't mean that we can now assert everything to be true just because.
I never said that.
No, and if we want to know whether or something is true, then we need a demonstration. It is about our knowledge. Something can be true, and we
Right.
don't know that it's true.
No. Yes.
And so,
But
therefore, that's where the demonstration comes in.
But that's what I'm saying. So in order for me to know that what you said is so you said, in order to know something's true, it has to be demonstrated. Before I can believe that, I need you to demonstrate that for me.
I think I just did. I think I just did. It isn't. It
You just
isn't.
repeated yourself.
So here's the misunderstanding. Something being true and we knowing that it's true are two completely different things.
No, I understand that.
And
That's
that's
what I'm
and
saying.
that's
I need
and, but
for me
that's
to-
hold on, but that's what I meant. So something can be true, but for us to know this and to use this in a claim, we need to determine first whether or not it is actually true.
Right, and I'm telling you to demonstrate that. Demonstrate that belief you have. Demonstrate that that's true.
I
please.
already did that as well. I told you there's an orange dragon in front of me. Is that a claim you
No,
can accept as
that's-
true? Or would you need a would
That's-
you
no.
no, hold on. Would you need a demonstration in order to accept that as being true? Or would you accept that as being true without a demonstration?
You're giving me an example of something that you're assuming is true. So if I said all dogs are brown, and you said demonstrate that's true, and I said dog's brown, does that mean that what I said was true? No, it just means I have an example of something I'm saying. You're saying in order to know anything at all, it has to be demonstrated. So that encompasses any and everything. I'm asking you to demonstrate.
No, because I would reject.
how you know.
I would reject that demonstration. If you show me one dog that is brown, that doesn't logically follow that all dogs are brown.
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying about your dragon illustration. Show me one example in which a demonstration may be needed doesn't prove that every single item of knowledge necessarily entails that it must be demonstrated. So until you can demonstrate that, I can't believe that. You have to be able to demonstrate that every item of knowledge necessarily requires demonstration. You have to demonstrate that that's true, according to your own standard.
As I said, I think I just did. I said there's an orange dragon in front of me. Is that a true statement or a false statement?
I'm agnostic on it. I don't know.
Exactly. And I'm agnostic on premise 2 of the Kalam cosmological argument. Therefore,
Okay, well, being agnostic about it then doesn't mean that you think it's
you
false.
are agnostic about it too, because you have no clue.
No, I know. I have belief that it's true, which means I'm not agnostic.
You have belief, but you do not have knowledge that it's true.
But we're not talking about knowledge. We're talking about beliefs.
Yes, okay, but you could believe that the moon is made of green cheese. Hold on, I think your camera just went out.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it did.
Yeah, so we can continue while you solve the problem. I
Sure.
can believe that the moon is made of green cheese. That has no bearing on whether or not the moon is made of green cheese.
I'm gonna have to switch to my laptop camera. Sorry about that, because my phone died. I was using my phone as
Shall we
camera.
quote Eric Hovind now? Evolution is supposed to make everything better. So why do we have to have technical difficulties? It's literally a claim he uses.
Okay, hold on. Let me just. Oh, not what I meant to do. Okay. Okay. So
And
the
you're
quality's
back.
not going to be as good. Okay, so yeah, I don't know how you could demonstrate Let me
Well,
ask.
let's
I don't
let's
know. I don't
turn
know how
let's
you.
okay, let's turn it around. Can you demonstrate that the premise is true? And do you think
I
that you
think so.
need
Yeah.
and do you think that you need to demonstrate that the premise is true?
Well, I think scientists have demonstrated it's true. I think that we do in fact know, according to the models, scientific models of the Big Bang, it would demonstrate the universe had a beginning. I think there's only two options: either it had a beginning or it's eternal. If you want to believe the universe is eternal, that's fine. Now you say you're agnostic on the issue, that's fine too. Um, so we
I
can
have
look
to
at
I
different.
have to say I'm aware of literally not a single scientist who said that the universe had a beginning. So if you can after
So
this
the scientists,
conversation, if you can shoot me some links to some scientific papers that
sure.
actually state that the universe had a beginning.
Well,
I
is it called the BG theorem? I forget what the theorem's called. That points to the universe having a beginning. Are you aware of those scientists? Alan Guth,
I'm aware
Vilenkin.
I'm aware of what was his name, Sirotkin or something like that, a Russian scientist who claims that he can look past Planck time. That claim has been
BGV.
yeah yeah uh,
BGV theorem. And I'm surprised you
yeah
used the Guth Vilenkin theorem,
Silenkin,
which
yes, sorry,
Vilenkin. So
Sirotkin is
Ward,
a race
Guth, and
driver.
Vilenkin. There's three different scientists. What about even the guy Lemaire who came up with the Big Bang theory? Do you know the guy who came up with that?
Lemaitre, he was
Hmm.
a Belgian Catholic priest. Yes.
He was an astrophysicist, right? He was a
Yes,
scientist,
yes, yes.
right?
He's
So
a scientist, and
right,
and another thing, he didn't come up with the Big Bang, which is
so
I think is a fun fact
he
because the people who came up with the Big Bang were creationists who were rejecting it, were then mocking it, and that term was
no.
popularized, and
So
that's where we got the term Big Bang, but nothing
so that's
bang.
actually you're that's
Go ahead.
almost correct. You're almost. So what happened was, so like as you said, a believer Christian came up with the theory that the universe had a beginning, and it was actually atheist astronomers who were making fun of that, and they coined the term Big Bang as a way to make fun of the Christian. So it was actually atheists that coined the term Big Bang, but it was a Christian who came up with the theory the universe had a beginning. And I forget what the quote is. It's saying something like scientists can no longer hide behind an infinite universe or something like that, that they must admit it had a beginning. I'm really surprised that you don't know of any scientists that would claim the universe had a beginning, because that's if I'm not mistaken, that might be the consensus,
Um,
which is on the basis
And
of the Big Bang model.
are you aware that the consensus at the moment might even be shifting because the Big Bang theory that there are several scientists who already are trying to poke holes in the whole Big Bang theory, which
So you're
and
telling me,
I'm not an astrophysicist. I just pick up
sure.
little bits and pieces everywhere.
In other words, I think you're
But
exaggerating the claim. You're overstating
no,
it,
no,
whether
no,
intentional or
no,
not.
oh
Because
no,
even
no.
if hold on,
As
let me finish my statement.
Go ahead.
Even if you're telling me that the consensus is shifting, in order for it to shift, that has to imply that not everybody thinks in the first place the universe is eternal. So that would imply by default some people think it had a beginning. So for you to say you know of no scientist that thinks the universe had a beginning, then you could never say that the consensus is shifting, because in order to shift, there has to be people on both sides.
And that I think is a non sequitur because if if a certain thing in our knowledge uh, proves to be wrong, then we have to suspend our judgment until better evidence comes in. It isn't automatically a default. So
I never said it was. You
for a long time, people thought that the universe was eternal, and then the Big Bang theory uh, uh, was.
so you are aware of that. You are aware of scientists who that believe the universe had a beginning.
No, I am not aware of. So, I'll have to clarify. The known universe is something completely different than the singularity from which our universe originated. So, if we're talking about eternity, and we're talking about our known universe, the way it we see it today, that had a beginning in the expansion of the singularity. What the state of our known universe was prior to that, if we can even say prior, because time started at that time, and we have no clue whether or not time exists outside the universe, so that would be a nonsensical statement. But we have no clue what happened there. So we cannot make an informed judgment whether or not the universe is eternal or not. And if we cannot make an informed statement whether or not the universe is eternal, we can also not make a clear statement on whether or not the universe had a beginning. And that's what I'm saying.
Here's the issue I have with what you're saying. You're saying, because you keep using certain words that I think, no offense, I think they're cop-out words or phrases that are kind of ad hoc to get you out of a corner. Because you said the universe as we currently know it. In that state, you said that may have had a beginning, but not the state before that. If we're going to talk about states of the universe is constantly changing states. The universe is constantly expanding. So the universe that I experienced yesterday is not the same universe I'm experiencing today because the states have changed. One more person was born. 10 more people were born. A few people died. My grass grew a little bit longer. So
let alone the size of the universe and the distance between planets.
Right. So if you're going to talk about states of the universe, then technically every single second a new universe is coming into existence, according to what you're saying.
No. Not a new universe. Our universe.
Sure it is.
Our universe is in motion. We have one universe which is in motion. It is the same. It is the same universe, and whether or not someone is born or dies has no impact on anything, because.
Well, it has a state of change.
Because matter and energy cannot be destroyed or created. So whether or not matter is in this form, as in a human being, or in a different form, as in a completely decayed human being, the matter is still there. So the universe doesn't change; its internal state changes. That's a difference.
Let's. However you want to say it, that's fine. I think we're just saying the same thing in different terms. But basically, I'm saying that you're special pleading here.
No.
But I know we've spent a lot of time on this particular topic, yes, and I know there's other things you wanted to address.
Yeah. So we're coming up to an hour and a half. That's usually where I want to end the show. And we've talked about this before, and now we've had an entire conversation. Would you be willing to come back for another conversation?
Sure.
Great. Then there's one thing I need to touch on, the whole thing with Arn Ra. I want to do that really quick, and maybe we can touch on that in a subsequent conversation. Because here's the thing that I saw. I saw the fallout, obviously, after the debate with Inspiring Philosophy, and I do say. I'm a little bit shocked by Arn's reaction there. I can empathize a little bit because of the frustration, and I saw your conversation that was after the whole thing. I think you made a fun video on your channel first, which I've shown several people.
Thank you.
I thought it's hilarious. I mean, I do not agree with it. The fact that there's good comedy in the video, I can always appreciate good comedy, whether or not it makes sense to me or not. That I don't care. But if it's good comedy, so the usage of and I forgot his name from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. That comparison just blew my mind. I thought that was great. So I think the whole problem with the conversation was that Arn has a specific claim that he makes, and that is scientific evidence for God. And during the talk with IP, and even during your talk with Arn, it shifted from evidence instead of scientific evidence, which is empirical evidence. And I think that's where the problem lies. And I told you I would be more than happy to contact Arne and to see if we can revisit this, because I think that would be a really good conversation. Knowing Arne and knowing the topic, and maybe it would be good if there's a moderator. I'd be more than happy to do that. But I also think that I think the timing of the conversation maybe was a little bit wrong. The fact that you had made that video, obviously.
That's why he invited me on, to be honest with you.
Yes. So, but I think that would still be a really good topic to hammer out, and I would really like to see you and Arden hammer that out. So, and I'd be more than happy to set that up. Sorry. So, and the reason that I bring it up is I think it just derailed because from what I saw, you were literally talking past each other. You were talking about completely different things. And in the heat of the conversation, I think that got lost. And there were also, it veered off in different directions. This talk did as well, but we hadn't set a specific topic. So I'm completely fine with that, because it just happens at times. There were several questions in the side chat, so maybe if we can at the end go over some questions that I may not have been asked, because otherwise I'm going to be in trouble with my co-host, who has been putting all these questions nicely in the DM on Twitter.
Sure.
But I would really like to have another talk and cover a few more topics, because as I said, in the talk you had with David Smalley, there was just so much. You can never do that in an hour and a half.
Sure.
Okay, so let me see if I... About a worldview. So my co-host, Artemis Brain Sample, he says, I believe that children are the future. Is that my worldview or an opinion?
It's an opinion that is based on your worldview.
Okay. And then one of our oldest viewers, not entirely in age, but in time, Beach Price said she got the idea that everything is a belief to you. Would you agree with that? And if so, why is that?
Everything is a belief to me? I'm not sure if I understand the question.
So I have to agree at least in part. Everything in your life is based in a belief, not necessarily in a knowledge. At least that's, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I'm getting that wrong, but that's what I got from your talk with David Smalley, and that's what I got from your talk with On Ra, and I have no clue whether or not that's actually correct. So that's why I think it's a great question.
So as I'm saying that, so I don't understand the question. I think it's could you rephrase the question for me so I can understand what she's asking?
Yes. Everything you form an opinion about, is that based on a belief, or is that based on actual knowledge?
Well, I think it's no offense.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I'm having a little bit of difficulty trying to word the question, but I think it's irrelevant to how it's worded. I think it's the wrong question. It's a poor question in the sense that belief is a prerequisite to knowledge. So even if someone claims that they know something, they still believe what they claim to know. So everything we do is going to be based on a belief, not just me. For example, you said that you get the impression that
everything I'm doing is based on a belief. Well, that's your belief, right? I mean, so you have beliefs that you base your actions and assumptions and other beliefs on. So I don't. It's an odd question because everything is based on a belief. Now, if the other question is now, do I claim to know the things I believe? Of course, yeah, absolutely. I claim to know that God exists. Now, obviously, if God does not exist, then it's actually not knowledge. But if God does exist, then yeah, I have knowledge that God exists. So it's a question of whether or not God exists. Other beliefs, like for example, so everything that I argued from a point of knowledge, not a point of ignorance. So I don't know how, like Leibniz's law of identity. That's something I know. The fact that that we live in a universe and I exist and that I'm conscious and that you're conscious. The fact that mental states don't have physical states. Those are things that I know, and I think we know because it's what I'm. There's a lot that I know. So again, it's an odd question to ask. Of course, I believe the things that I believe, and of course, I base my life on what I believe. Who doesn't?
Okay. So, yeah, so I would agree with you that knowledge is a subset of belief. And that's pretty much accepted everywhere. And you also answered the question from Doubting Thomas. You said if God exists, does he claim to know God exists? Which you just said that you claim you know God exists, which would be a good one to talk about in a subsequent conversation. So. I just saw Critical Crippled. Can you do me a favor? Can you put in the links to Eric's Twitter account and to his YouTube channel? You're way better than this than I am. So please put in Eric's information as well so people can go check him out. Another question was what's the evidence for the soul? We touched on that briefly. I don't think entirely enough, but well, maybe we can revisit that another time as well.
On my channel, I have videos where I discuss like there's one of you that's like 2.5 hours long, and most of that video is me. It's a case for the soul. So if anyone's curious, they can go there as well.
Yeah. Yes, we had a comment from Doc Savage, who is going to be on the show on Thursday, 1:30 U.S. Central, 1:30 p.m. U.S. Central, and 8:30 European time, which I'm really looking forward. He said robots are not biological entities, and he said the comparison isn't valid, which I would agree with. Although we could start arguing for, as I said, artificial intelligence.
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
So my comparison wasn't. So he must have missed why I was making that comparison, because it wasn't to show that it was analogous. I said that because according to the criteria you gave, you said when I asked how do we see consciousness or know if something's conscious, you said things like responding to stimulus, and I said, okay, well if robots can respond to stimulus, well, that doesn't mean they're conscious just because they can respond to stimulus. So in other words, I was simply showing a counterexample to what you said, that saying that there has to be more than simply those criteria to meet to know something's conscious. So it is analogous, relevant to the point I was making, that simply responding to external stimulus in an environment is not a sufficient condition for demonstrating consciousness.
So at the point where we're talking about this, I would agree that it was a valid point to bring up, because we were talking about whether or not how we determine consciousness. So
yes,
that was the topic. So I would agree with you on that. Then I got another one from Artemis Brain Sample, which we could revisit next time. If we're made in the image of God, how would it work if we're made in the image of God? God has no body, is just a spirit. Then I already know your answer, because you believe that we are spiritual as well, and that the soul is immaterial and not part of our body, and the soul exists after we die. Did I sum that up well?
Yeah, that's perfectly in the ballpark. Yeah, that would be part of my answer. I would preface the answer by first saying we have to first define what it means to be the image of God. So when we think image of God, we don't necessarily mean something visual. Just like, you could say like, oh man, that kid is, he has your image. Now in that sense, we might be referring to characteristics, or we might be referring to something else. So image doesn't necessarily mean. So other translations might say in the likeness or something like that. So in other words, it's not, when we say image, it's not like in the visual sense of what God looks like. So that could mean anything from our nature to our capacities, or even like what you were saying. Yeah, absolutely. That I think at my essence, I'm an immaterial soul. And I would say that the soul isn't that my body is infused with my soul. So there's definitely cause and effect correlations going on. There's a relationship between my body and soul. So I do think I am at my nature an immaterial substance. That doesn't follow that somehow it has absolutely no connection to the body.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I was just responding to something in the side chat. I can't write and listen at the same time, and I have to juggle the screens as well, so it doesn't always work. Beach Price said she was a little bit disappointed that the soul didn't get proven. I really wanted to get to that. We got stuck a little, I think, too long on the whole Kalam thing. Which we still haven't hammered out the way I wanted it to, but yeah, we can go there for the next one. Beach Price also had a question, and I think a really good question. When they thought the universe was eternal, and that proved, I think that should be, there was a word out here. When they thought the universe was eternal, and that proved no God, were they and that proved God, were they wrong? I'm not entirely sure. I think that should have been when the universe had a beginning, and that proved God, were they wrong? And can they be wrong now? That's the question. Can they be wrong now? Can they be wrong in the future? And how do you know when they're wrong?
Logic and reasoning is how I know when someone is right or wrong. That's the tool I use for any and everything. So for example, I mean, I don't want to make it longer by going back into Kalam, but like we barely touched on the Kalam, and you're right, that was more of a tangent that got us off into that. But I guess I'll just say you can go on my channel and look at other stuff. But the fact that you can't traverse infinity, you can't count to infinity, you can't count down. You can't count from infinity or to infinity. And I would argue that if we're here today, then it follows that there could not have been a past series of infinite events. And that would be a logically deductive philosophical proof the universe had a beginning. I mean, there's a lot more to say to that. But basically, let's suppose that the universe did not have a beginning. Would that prove God wrong? No, because it would only prove that particular version, that Kalam cosmological argument, wouldn't be a valid argument for the existence of God. There's another argument that I use, known as the argument for contingency, which wouldn't be affected by whether or not the universe was eternal or had a beginning. So it's a different type of an argument. So if anything, I could say that if the universe was eternal, then at best, all it would do would be to show that the Kalam cosmological argument is not a valid argument for God's existence. It would be like me, like for example, let's look at evolution. Let's pretend evolution is true, and I use, and I know you're gonna laugh at this, right? If I said I believe evolution is true because we evolved from monkeys, and let's pretend that was proven false. Okay, well that doesn't prove evolution didn't happen. That just proves that the reason I had for believing in evolution was false, or I had a really bad reason for believing it. So if the universe had a beginning, know that wouldn't prove God doesn't exist. It would just, again, take away one argument in a plethora arsenal of arguments for God's existence.
I could add a third option there as well, because if let's say tomorrow it's proven that we didn't evolve from monkeys, that still wouldn't prove evolution wrong, because there's still enough to let us know that evolution is a fact. So it just
that's what I was saying.
Yeah. So okay. Then we got a comment from Doc Savage as a direct retort, and that's also one we didn't get to. You made the claim that a God exists. Can this be demonstrated? You already said it can be demonstrated, so I would really like to get to that in a follow up.
Would depend. Yeah, it depends on what you mean by demonstrated. So, but I think we should believe things that are true, and I believe that one of the ways we get to things that are true are by showing, like logical deductions get to things that are true. And if you consider that a demonstration, then I think yes, it can be demonstrated in that sense through a logical deduction.
Okay. We have another one from Frustrated Atheist. If the Big Bang happened, wasn't it the universe that expanded? And if that's true, can you now say that when that matter can you now say when that matter and energy wasn't the universe?
No, I think whatever was there was the universe, whether it expanded or not. Whatever existed was the universe. That's what I was saying. I think you were the one that was saying that,
Yeah.
well, it's a different state, so we can't call it our current universe, and that's what I was disagreeing with.
Okay. Well, that's exactly what I would say as well. So at least we've got one point of agreement at the end of all of this. Last question that was put in to my list, at least. That's from the empathetic atheist. Can Eric demonstrate a mind absent a brain without deflecting? It's a yes or no question.
Well, if I could allow for a preface before answering, I would say it would depend on what you mean by demonstration. And given that I don't think consciousness is physical, then I don't think you can ever demonstrate consciousness if by demonstrate you mean some type of physical sense. Because I don't think anybody anywhere could ever demonstrate that consciousness exists. You can't. It's not something you can demonstrate. Especially by demonstrate you mean it's something physical. It's
No. So
there's no science.
I'll have to get back to the question. Can you?
So let me say no.
Can you?
So no, because first of all, you cannot demonstrate consciousness. So it's like asking, can you demonstrate that the number two exists?
I get you.
You know, can you weigh it? Well, if it's not something physical, then there's no test you can do on it because you can things that are physical in that sense. And I would say the entire question assumes that consciousness can be, quote, demonstrated in any sense. That's something we started off on. And I was asking, how can you demonstrate consciousness at all? How can we see consciousness? I'd argue consciousness is not something you can see. It's a material. It's non-physical. So in that sense, you would have to first demonstrate consciousness is in the brain in order to demonstrate a consciousness without the brain. So the entire question would first have to be asked, how do you demonstrate consciousness at all? That would be the prerequisite question to answer. So I'm going to just go ahead and say no, since they asked for yes or no. No, because I think it's a category fallacy. The very question itself is a category fallacy.
Okay. Well, at least we got the questions out of the way. I have to say that I was looking forward to this for a long time, and I wasn't disappointed. I think we had a
well, thank you very much.
We had a good conversation, and as I said, I'm really hoping that we can do more. Before, that's another thing I need to mention. You said before we went live that you were interested in talking to people. I'm more than happy to set that up to facilitate that. If people want to have similar conversations, let them contact me, and I'll get in touch with you, and we'll set it up. I'll be more than happy to host that. That's not a problem at all. And if there are people that you would like to talk to and you would like me to contact, I'd make you the exact same offer. No problem.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I have no preferences. I don't ever look for debates or anything like that, per se. And I'm assuming lockdown's gonna be lifted and get more looser pretty soon, and we'll be returning back to work. So, all things being equal, I would say I'm open to conversations as long as I have the time. I'm not interfering with my family, and of course, I'm not doing something for work or traveling or anything like that. So yeah, just with that preface, because I don't want somebody to say, "Oh, you're not going to do it because you know."
No. Let's be clear about this. I mean, everyone has a real life outside of YouTube. So if it's not possible, then it's not possible. I mean, that's just the facts of life. I mean, there's nothing you can do. It's not that. I don't think that you're the type that would just decline a conversation based on the fact that maybe the opponent was too strong or too weak or whatever. I don't see you doing anything like that. You've come across as a sincere person to me, at least, and
Thank you.
we've been in and out of touch for since 2017, so it's not based on just one conversation. You did say we would have a conversation. Took a long time, so people. I had to wait 3 years. If that happens to you, tough. I mean, no problem.
Yeah. And to be fair to you, I know you had some health issues, and then, like I said, I had a son, and then Harvey came through. I used to live in Houston, and it flooded the entire Houston, and you know there was a lot of things going on, especially even in 2017. My son was born in 2018, so yeah, from the time we started talking, a lot went through. But yeah, you're right. You know, this has been a 3 year in the making conversation. So if anybody gets a conversation in less than 3 years, hey, consider yourself blessed, I guess.
So no one should get any faster than I. I mean, hey. So Eric, as I said, I love the conversation, and I really hope to see you back. Stick around. We have a little commercial at the end, and then I'll get back.
Before we go off.
Yeah, go ahead.
Before we go off, I've made it I've made it a point to try and do this with everybody that I talk to that's a non-believer. 2 questions that I end with. One is, what's your biggest objection to Christianity? And whatever that is, can I buy a book for you that you would be willing to read? And if you say no, that's fine. And then my last question is, can I pray with you on air before we hang up?
Okay, so on the prayer, I'll have to be clear, because we have one rule: we do not allow preaching or prayer on the show. So I appreciate the offer, and so as for a book that you want me to read, was that a clear offer to me? Because I was a little bit distracted, but because we had a glitch in on YouTube, so I was looking at if I did anything wrong.
Yeah, no, and that's fine. We can, when we go off air, I'd still like to pray with you. So, and if you say no to that too, that's fine. But the first question was, what's your biggest objection to Christianity? Like, if you could get this objection answered, you would become a Christian or consider Christianity more seriously. And whatever your answer to that, what's your biggest objection? If there's a book that I think would be good for that, and could I buy it for you, and would you read it? I
would definitely read it. That's without a question. My biggest objection would probably be the Bible, and that would probably be two more shows to flesh everything out. And
so, like inerrancy, or the what aspect of the Bible, I guess. And that's an interesting objection, because I don't see how that would. But I don't want to keep.
So my go-to argument is exactly the same as Matt Dillahunty's slavery in the Bible.
Have you read the Moral Monster book by Paul Copan?
No.
Okay, could I buy that for you and send it to you?
Feel free, no problem.
Okay, great.
I can.
Awesome.
We can do that after the show. I really want to shut down the show. We went just over 2 hours, and I want people to watch this, and the longer we go, the less people we probably get to watch this. So
understandable, yeah.
Thanks again for coming on. Do you have any last words to the audience, and then we'll end the conversation?
No, just thank you guys for watching. Appreciate the interaction and the questions. You can look me up on YouTube. Just type in Eric Hernandez, or Facebook. Eric Hernandez Ministries. You can find my Facebook page there. I'd be happy to converse with you. Links allows, of course.
Links are in the description. And thanks for that, Dave Critical Cripple. I asked him to put all the links to your social media in the side chat, which he did. I will copy those, and I will put them in the description later. So
thanks.
Okay. Perfect.